There comes a moment when you realize that most of your life has been spent reacting. Reacting to other people's expectations. Reacting to the pressure to look successful. Reacting to the fear that you'll never be enough. And when you finally pause, really pause, you notice something unsettling. You don't even know whose life you're living anymore. Maybe that's where you are right now. You feel exhausted from trying to keep up. You feel disconnected from your own instincts. You lie awake at night, replaying old mistakes, worrying about the future, silently asking yourself if you're ever going to feel clear, steady, fulfilled. If you're tired of feeling like a passenger in your own story, this is your moment. Because here's the truth: you have more power than you think. You have the ability to retrain your mind, to reclaim your focus, and to start steering your life with intention instead of fear. This isn't going to be another talk telling you to hustle harder or pretend to be positive when you feel broken inside. This is an invitation to do something deeper, to learn how to control your thoughts, to redirect your energy, and to finally become the kind of person who isn't just surviving but transforming. You don't need to have it all figured out before you begin. You just need to be willing to take the first step, to sit with your own truth, to ask yourself the questions you've been avoiding, to try something different. Because when you learn to direct your mind instead of letting it run you, everything changes. The anxiety that once felt overwhelming starts to loosen its grip. The shame that kept you small starts to dissolve. The dreams you buried under doubt start to surface again. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you'll walk away with a blueprint for self-transformation, one you can start applying today. A blueprint that will show you how to stop drifting and start building a life that feels honest and alive. So take a deep breath. Let yourself be here fully, because this might be the conversation that changes everything. One of the most liberating truths you can ever learn is this: the thoughts that pop into your mind are not necessarily true. They're not always useful. And most of the time, they don't even belong to the real you. If you don't question them, they will run your life on autopilot. You have to get honest about how much power you give to the mental noise inside your head. Because your thoughts create your feelings influence your actions, and your actions shape your results. When you let unexamined thoughts drive the car, you shouldn't be surprised when you end up somewhere you don't want to be. Most people never stop to question the voice narrating their day. They never pause to realize that voice is often just a loop of old conditioning, outdated fears, and stories you picked up without consent. You inherited some of them from your parents, your culture, your past experiences. Some of those stories started as a way to protect you. For example, if you were criticized when you were young, your brain learned to rehearse negative predictions to help you avoid future pain. If you were rejected, your mind latched onto the idea that you weren't good enough. It felt safer to expect disappointment than to risk being blindsided by it again. But what helped you survive before might be the very thing keeping you stuck now. It's not that your thoughts are malicious. They're just old programs running in the background. Your brain is wired to conserve energy, so it relies on familiar pathways, even when those pathways lead you into self-doubt and paralysis. You can't stop thoughts from appearing. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop blindly believing every thought that passes through your awareness. When a thought pops up, like, "I'll never be able to change," or "I'm not disciplined enough," or "people will judge me," the moment you catch it, you create an opportunity. That opportunity is the gap between stimulus and response. In that gap is your freedom to choose a different interpretation. Instead of automatically accepting every mental headline as gospel truth, you get to ask yourself, is this thought helpful? Is it accurate? Is it moving me closer to the life I want? This doesn't mean you pretend to be positive all the time. It means you develop the skill of discernment. You learn to see thoughts as suggestions, not commands. You practice observing them with curiosity instead of judgment. You recognize that just because a thought feels real doesn't mean it reflects reality. If you look back, you'll notice that countless predictions your mind made never came true. So why keep giving those fearful forecasts the final say over your actions? Start by noticing how often you label yourself and your thoughts. You might say, "I'm lazy. I'm unlovable. I'm bad with money. I'm too old to start over." Those are not facts. They're opinions your brain repeats so often that you mistake them for reality. If you want to control your mind, you must separate who you are from what you think. The moment you say, "I'm having the thought that I'm lazy," instead of "I am lazy," you create distance. You remind yourself that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. That perspective shift is subtle, but it's the difference between living in a mental prison and realizing you hold the key to the door. Another powerful practice is to label thoughts by category. Instead of getting swept up in the drama of every worry, you can say, oh, that's a fear thought, or that's a comparison thought, or that's a perfectionism thought. Giving thoughts a label instantly reduces their power. It's like shining a flashlight in a dark room. The monster shrinks when you see it clearly. When you can name a thought, you create enough space to choose how to respond. Your mind loves to serve up evidence to support whatever belief you're currently entertaining. If you tell yourself, I can't change, your brain will dutifully search the archives for every example of when you failed before. It will conveniently ignore all the times you were resilient, resourceful, and brave. This is called confirmation bias. It's why it feels so convincing when you argue for your limitations. Your brain wants consistency more than it wants truth. It will bend reality to match your dominant stories. That's why it's so critical to question those stories at the root. You can't expect new results if you're committed to old narratives. You are not powerless against the stream of thoughts. You have the ability to train your focus. The first step is awareness. Most people's mental habits are invisible to them because they never slow down enough to notice. You have to create moments of stillness, just 5 minutes a day, where you simply watch your thoughts without reacting. Imagine sitting on the bank of a river, watching leaves float by. Each thought is just another leaf drifting past. You don't have to jump in the water and grab onto every one. You don't have to believe every story your mind spins. You can watch them come and go, knowing you are separate from them. Sometimes your thoughts will feel especially loud and urgent when you're tired, stressed, or outside your comfort zone. That's when your brain defaults to familiar scripts. You might notice a flood of negative self-talk the moment you try something new. That's not a sign you should stop. It's a sign you're stretching. Your nervous system interprets change as danger because it can't predict what will happen next. Your job is to recognize that alarm without surrendering to it. You can feel fear without obeying it. You can have doubts without letting them dictate your choices. One of the simplest ways to take control is to talk back to your thoughts. Not with fake affirmations you don't believe, but with grounded reminders. When your mind says, this is going to be a disaster, you can respond, maybe, but I don't actually know that. When it says, I'm going to fail, you can say, it's possible, but it's also possible I'll learn something important. When it insists, I'm not good enough, you can counter, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm allowed to be imperfect. The point isn't to never have negative thoughts. The point is to stop letting them have the last word. Every time you choose not to buy into an unhelpful thought, you weaken its hold. You prove to yourself that you are capable of noticing and redirecting your mental energy. Over time, this practice rewires your brain. The neural pathways you use most often become stronger. The ones you ignore start to fade. This is neuroplasticity in action. Your brain is always adapting to how you use it. If you keep rehearsing stories of limitation, those pathways become highways. If you consistently interrupt those stories and choose more empowering interpretations, you build new mental roads. This is how you move from feeling like a prisoner of your mind to becoming the conscious architect of it. The biggest mistake people make when they want to change their life is waiting for a surge of motivation to wash over them. They imagine that someday they'll wake up with a perfectly clear mind, overflowing with energy, completely ready to make all the changes they've been putting off. But the truth is, that day rarely comes. Real transformation doesn't happen because you feel inspired. It happens because you decide, in a small moment, to do something different than you've always done before. Most of us underestimate the power of micro-decisions, the tiny, almost invisible choices you make in the span of a few seconds. Those moments might seem too insignificant to matter, but in reality, they are the levers that shift the direction of your life. When you think about the habits you want to break or the goals you want to achieve, it's easy to focus on the big picture. You think about losing 50 pounds or building a business or completely rewiring your mindset. And while it's important to have a vision, it's even more important to understand that the vision is built one micro decision at a time. Consider what happens when you feel the urge to procrastinate. Maybe you're sitting at your desk, staring at a project you've been avoiding. Your mind starts spinning a familiar script. I'm too tired. I'll never get this done. What's the point? If you don't interrupt that thought pattern in the first few seconds, it quickly snowballs into inaction. Before you know it, you're scrolling your phone or wandering into the kitchen for a snack. And later, you feel frustrated and ashamed that you didn't follow through. But there is always a brief window, a tiny space between the urge to avoid and the moment you act on it. In that window, you have the power to make a micro decision. You can decide to take a single action that breaks the loop. That action might be as small as opening the file. It might be setting a timer for 5 minutes and telling yourself you only have to work until it goes off. It might be closing your eyes and taking 3 deep breaths to reset your nervous system. These small moves don't look impressive from the outside, but they are the building blocks of self-mastery. Your brain is designed to favor what feels familiar and comfortable, even if that comfort zone is filled with habits that sabotage you. It feels safer than stepping into the unknown. That's why waiting to feel ready is a losing strategy. You can't wait until the resistance goes away before you act. You have to act while you still feel the pull to stay exactly where you are. When you choose a micro decision in the presence of discomfort, you're training yourself to value progress over perfection. Micro decisions are powerful because they shrink the intimidation factor of change. If you tell yourself you have to overhaul your entire life overnight, you will freeze. It's too overwhelming. But if you focus on what you can do in the next 60 seconds, your brain feels safe enough to engage. You bypass the alarm system that keeps you stuck. One of the most effective questions you can ask yourself is, what is the next small step I can take? Right now, not tomorrow. Not after you feel motivated. Right now. The truth is, you don't need a flawless strategy to start moving forward. You need the courage to take one imperfect action. That action generates momentum. It proves to your nervous system that you can survive the discomfort of doing something new. Each time you choose to act instead of ruminate, you weaken the neural pathways that keep you stuck in old patterns. You create evidence that you are capable of making change, and that evidence compounds over time into an unshakable sense of self-trust. It helps to think of micro-decisions as mental reps. Every time you choose action over avoidance, you are strengthening a muscle. The first reps feel heavy. You'll hear 100 excuses in your mind about why you can't or why it won't matter. But if you can push through the initial resistance, even for 60 seconds, you start to build capacity. You prove to yourself that you can interrupt the cycle. Over time, it gets easier. The more you practice, the faster you become at spotting the moment of choice and seizing it. People often think they need to overhaul their identity before they can act differently, but the process actually works in reverse. You become the person you want to be by making small decisions that align with that identity. If you want to see yourself as disciplined, you don't have to wait to feel like a disciplined person. You start by making a tiny disciplined choice, closing social media, standing up when the alarm goes off, writing the first sentence of the email you've been avoiding. Those micro decisions are how you prove to your brain that you are someone who takes action. A common misconception is that micro decisions don't count because they're too small. But in reality, small, consistent actions create the most meaningful change. You don't climb a mountain by leaping to the summit. You take one step, and then another, and then another. If you look at the path ahead and tell yourself you have to climb the whole thing in one go, you will never start. But if you narrow your focus to the next foothold, you build momentum. Micro decisions also help you bypass the trap of perfectionism. When you focus on the smallest next step, there's no room to obsess over whether it will be good enough. You give yourself permission to take messy, imperfect action. And that action is what builds clarity and confidence. You can't think your way into transformation. You have to act your way there. The next time you catch yourself spiraling into overthinking or self-doubt, try this count backward from 5 and then move. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. This countdown interrupts the mental chatter and propels you into action before your brain can talk you out of it. That single moment of movement can snap you out of the trance of inertia. It's not magic, it's physics. Objects in motion stay in motion. You just have to get yourself moving. When you make micro decisions a daily practice, you train your mind to look for opportunities instead of obstacles. You rewire your brain to default to action instead of avoidance, and you build a track record of small wins that compound into big results. Over time, you'll look back and realize that every meaningful transformation in your life started with a single moment when you chose to do something different instead of repeating the same old pattern. Most people think the way to feel better is to sit still and think their way out of a problem. They believe if they just analyze the situation enough, they'll finally discover the insight that makes everything click into place. But if you look at the moments in your life when you've felt the most energized, the most creative, and the most alive, you'll notice something simple but powerful: you were in motion. Movement isn't just something your body does. It's a lever you can pull to transform your mindset. Your brain and body are deeply connected. When you're stuck mentally, you're almost always stuck physically. You might be hunched over your phone, shoulders collapsed, breathing shallow and tight. That posture sends a message to your nervous system. I'm not safe. I'm under threat. I should shrink. When your body is in a defensive position, It's almost impossible for your mind to feel expansive. That's why the fastest way to shift your mental state is to change what your body is doing in real time. Think about the last time you were stressed or anxious. Did you notice your muscles tensing up, your jaw clenching, your heart racing? Those signals reinforce the story that you're overwhelmed and powerless. But the moment you stand up, roll your shoulders back, and take a deeper breath, you send a new message to your brain: I am safe, I am capable, I am in control. This isn't just a feel-good idea, it's biology. When you change your physical state, you trigger a cascade of neurochemicals that recalibrate your mood and your focus. One of the most overlooked tools you have for self-transformation is your own movement. You don't have to go run a marathon or spend an hour at the gym to reap the benefits. Even the smallest shifts in your body can create significant changes in your mindset. If you're sitting down feeling lethargic, stand up and stretch your arms overhead. If you're stuck in negative thinking, walk briskly around the block for 5 minutes. If you feel disconnected from yourself, shake out your hands, roll your neck, or bounce on your toes. These simple movements disrupt the feedback loop that keeps you mentally stuck. Physical movement also helps clear out emotional residue. When you go through something stressful, an argument, a setback, a disappointment, those emotions don't just live in your thoughts. They live in your tissues. You can feel them tightening your muscles, knotting your stomach, constricting your chest. If you never move your body, you never discharge that tension. You end up carrying it around, and it colors everything you think and feel. That's why movement can feel like an emotional reset. It gives your body a way to metabolize the stress you've been storing. There is research showing that rhythmic movement, like walking, running, dancing, has a profound impact on your mental state. It engages the hemispheres of your brain in a way that promotes integration and calm. That's why you often find yourself thinking more clearly or solving problems more creatively when you're moving. It's not a coincidence that some of your best ideas show up when you're out for a walk. Motion unlocks perspective. It gives your mind a chance to process, connect dots, and see possibilities you can't access when you're sitting still. Movement also primes you for action in other areas of your life. When you take a physical step forward, you're sending a symbolic message to yourself: I am willing to move. I am willing to engage. That willingness ripples into your work, your relationships, and your personal growth. If you wait to feel mentally ready before you take physical action, you'll wait forever. But if you move first, your mindset often follows. You can't think yourself into a new way of living. You have to live your way into a new way of thinking. One of the simplest practices to harness this power is to create a state change ritual. This is a specific set of movements you use anytime you feel stuck, anxious, or uninspired. Your ritual doesn't have to be complicated. It could be standing up, shaking out your arms, taking 3 deep breaths, and walking to another room. Or it could be as simple as putting on music and moving your body for 60 seconds. The key is to make it a habit so your nervous system starts to associate movement with possibility. When you start to feel yourself slipping into old patterns, procrastination, self-doubt, rumination, use movement as an interruption. Instead of arguing with your thoughts or trying to outthink your anxiety, stand up and move. Walk to the kitchen and drink a glass of water. Go outside and feel the air on your face. Do 10 jumping jacks. These small actions might seem too trivial to matter, but they are often the most reliable way to reset your energy. You can't overthink your way out of a slump, but you can often move your way out of one. It's also important to recognize how posture affects emotion. When you stand tall with your chest open and your head lifted, you create a physical state that supports confidence. Research shows that simply adopting a more expansive posture can lower cortisol, your stress hormone, and increase feelings of power and optimism. Conversely, when you collapse inward, hunching your shoulders, dropping your gaze, you reinforce feelings of helplessness. The next time you're feeling defeated, do a posture check. Straighten your spine, roll your shoulders back, lift your chin slightly. Notice how that subtle shift changes the story you're telling yourself. Movement doesn't just change your mood in the moment. It builds resilience over time. When you make physical activity a regular part of your life, you strengthen your capacity to handle stress. You create a baseline of well-being that makes it easier to bounce back from setbacks. You train your body and brain to work together as allies instead of adversaries. This doesn't mean you have to become an athlete. It simply means you commit to moving your body regularly, even when you don't feel like it. If you're serious about transforming your mindset, you have to respect the role your body plays in that process. You can't separate your physical state from your mental and emotional state. They are woven together in ways science is still uncovering. But you don't have to wait for all the research to be conclusive. You can experiment in your own life today. The next time you feel stuck, get up and move. The next time you feel overwhelmed, shake out the tension. The next time you feel uninspired, take a walk. You'll discover that your body holds a key to transformation you can't access through thinking alone. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to transform their lives is because they're obsessed with the outcome. They fixate on the final result, losing the weight, landing the job, hitting the financial goal, proving they're good enough. They measure their progress by whether or not they've achieved this big, shiny milestone. And when it doesn't happen fast enough, or when the path takes an unexpected turn, they feel like failures. It's so easy to fall into this trap because our culture rewards results. Nobody posts about the months of quiet, unglamorous effort it took to build a business. They post the screenshot of their revenue milestone. Nobody talks about the mornings they dragged themselves out of bed to work out when they didn't feel like it. They post the before and after photos. You see the highlight reel and think, I'll finally feel worthy when I get there. But that's an illusion. Chasing the outcome while ignoring the process almost always leaves you feeling empty and anxious, because no matter how big the achievement, it never fully satisfies you if you've spent the entire journey believing you're not enough without it. The moment you reach the finish line, you'll immediately look for the next goal. You'll move the target further away, and you'll stay stuck in the same cycle of never feeling complete. That's why one of the most powerful shifts you can make is to focus on the process instead of obsessing over the outcome. The process is what you do every day. It's the small choices, the repeated actions, the tiny habits. The process is the only part you can actually control. You can't control when or how the results will show up. You can't control how quickly things will grow or how people will respond. But you can always control how you show up for the work. When you commit to the process, you give yourself permission to detach your worth from external validation. You start measuring success by whether you honored your effort instead of whether you impressed everyone else. This doesn't mean you stop caring about results. It means you put them in their proper place. They become a byproduct, not the sole purpose. This shift is more than just a mindset tweak. It's a practical strategy that makes your goals sustainable. Because the truth is, results are unpredictable. Even if you do everything right, there will be setbacks. You'll have days when nothing seems to work. If your only source of motivation is seeing quick progress, you'll quit as soon as things slow down. But when you learn to appreciate the process for its own sake, you develop resilience. You build a foundation that doesn't crumble every time you hit an obstacle. Let's say you want to get in the best shape of your life. If you only care about what the scale says, you're going to have a miserable time because your body doesn't change on your preferred schedule. Some weeks you'll see dramatic shifts. Other weeks you'll plateau or even backslide. If you decide that the number on the scale determines your value, you'll sabotage yourself the first time it doesn't budge. You'll convince yourself you're failing. But if you focus on the process, moving your body every day, fueling yourself with nourishing food, getting enough rest, you'll start to feel proud of the effort itself. You'll realize that showing up consistently is the real victory. And ironically, when you stop obsessing over the outcome, you create the conditions for better results. Because you're no longer acting from desperation. You're acting from self-respect and curiosity. This approach applies to any area of life. Maybe you're working toward building a business. If you spend every day frantically checking your metrics, you're going to burn out. You'll start to measure your worth by the number of followers you have or the revenue you've generated. You'll feel like a failure anytime those numbers dip. But if you focus on the process, serving your audience, creating value, improving your skills, you'll keep showing up even when the growth is slower than you hoped. Process commitment doesn't mean you never set goals. You absolutely should have a vision for where you're headed. But once you've set that vision, you bring your focus back to today. You ask yourself, what does it look like to show up fully right now? You measure your progress by the actions you take, not the applause you get. You start to find satisfaction in the work itself. And here's something most people don't realize: the process is where all the growth happens. The process is where you build discipline, creativity, and grit. The process is where you learn who you are and what you're capable of. If you skip the process or rush through it, you rob yourself of the transformation you're actually craving. When you commit to the process, you also build trust with yourself. You prove that you can keep promises to yourself, regardless of whether things are going perfectly. You learn that your worth isn't conditional. It doesn't evaporate when you have a slow month or a hard week. It doesn't hinge on other people's approval. The next time you catch yourself obsessing over the outcome, pause. Take a deep breath. Remind yourself that results are lagging indicators. They show up after you've put in the work, not before, and the only way they ever show up is if you keep moving through the process. Instead of asking, "Am I there yet?" ask, "Did I honor my effort today?" This perspective also helps you stay in the present moment. When you're fixated on some future achievement, you spend your days in a constant state of tension. You tell yourself you'll be happy when you arrive, but when you bring your focus back to the process, you start to enjoy the work itself. You find meaning in the small steps. You discover that the path is the point. There's a quiet freedom in letting go of outcome obsession. You stop performing for an imaginary audience. You stop measuring your life in external trophies. You start to realize that every day you show up, every day you try again, every day you honor your process, you're already successful. You're already becoming the person you want to be. And that's the paradox. When you finally release the death grip on the outcome, you create space for better results because you're no longer acting from fear and scarcity. You're acting from commitment and self-respect. You're building something sustainable, something real, something that lasts. One of the most overlooked but transformative practices you can cultivate is the discipline of self-inquiry. In a world that rewards constant motion and external achievement, sitting quietly with your own thoughts can feel counterintuitive. But if you want to learn how to control your mind and redirect your energy, you need to create space to actually hear yourself think. You need a practice that helps you step outside the noise and check in with your deeper instincts. Most people don't do this. They're moving too fast. They wake up, grab their phone, scroll through notifications, answer messages, and start reacting to everything around them before they've taken a single conscious breath. This reactive rhythm becomes their default. Their days are a blur of obligations, distractions, and other people's priorities. By the time they climb into bed at night, they have no idea how they really feel or what they really need. They're so disconnected from themselves, they can't tell the difference between what's true and what's just noise. This is why self-inquiry matters. It's the practice of pausing long enough to ask yourself real questions and then waiting long enough to hear honest answers. It's not about judging yourself or fixing everything at once. It's about paying attention. It's about noticing the patterns that keep you stuck. It's about acknowledging the tension you've been ignoring. Most importantly, it's about reconnecting with your own wisdom instead of outsourcing your decisions to the world around you. A lot of people think reflection is something you do once in a while, like on your birthday or at the end of the year. But real transformation doesn't happen in occasional bursts of insight. It happens when you build a daily ritual that grounds you in your own awareness. When you make self-inquiry a habit, you create a foundation of self-trust. You teach yourself that no matter how chaotic life gets, you can always come back to this quiet place and find clarity. Your ritual doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as taking 5 or 10 minutes in the morning to sit with a notebook and write down what's on your mind. It could be a nightly check-in before you go to sleep, asking yourself, "What did I learn about myself today?" Or, "What am I avoiding?" It could even be a midday pause, stepping away from your desk, taking a walk, and asking, "Am I acting from alignment or from fear right now?" What matters isn't the format. What matters is the consistency. When you show up for this practice daily, you start to develop a deeper intimacy with yourself. You stop relying on other people to tell you what to do or who to be. You begin to notice the subtle signals, your intuition, your gut responses, your quiet longings that get drowned out when you're always in motion. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself every day is simply, "What am I feeling right now?" So many people never pause to answer this question honestly. They stay busy because they're afraid of what they'll discover if they slow down. Maybe they'll feel grief they've been avoiding. Maybe they'll notice resentment or loneliness. But awareness doesn't create pain. Awareness reveals the pain that's already there. And when you acknowledge it, you finally have the power to work with it instead of running from it. Self-inquiry is also how you start to notice the stories you tell yourself. Every one of us has a running internal narrative. These stories shape our identity and our decisions. Some of them are empowering. "I am resilient. I figure things out." But many are limiting. "I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I'll never change." The problem is, if you never slow down to question these stories, you end up living your life as if they are facts. When you create space for daily reflection, you start to see these stories for what they are, thought patterns, not truths. You can look at them objectively, with curiosity instead of judgment. You can ask yourself, is this story helping me or hurting me? Where did it come from? Do I want to keep believing it? This practice doesn't instantly erase negative thoughts, but it gives you perspective. It helps you remember that you are the observer of your thoughts, not the sum total of them. Another key benefit of daily self-inquiry is that it strengthens your ability to respond instead of react. Most people go through life on autopilot. They get triggered, and they immediately lash out or shut down. They feel discomfort, and they instantly reach for distraction. But when you build the habit of reflection, you create a buffer between stimulus and response. You start to recognize the early signs of reactivity: a racing heart, a tightening chest, an urge to escape, and you learn to pause. You learn to breathe. You learn to ask yourself, what's really happening here? That pause is everything. It's in that pause that you reclaim your power to choose. Instead of defaulting to old patterns, you can decide how you want to respond. You can choose to act from your values instead of your fears. You can choose to stay present instead of numbing out. And over time, those small, deliberate choices add up to profound change. Self-reflection also keeps you connected to your purpose. It's so easy to drift away from what matters to you when you're buried in tasks and expectations. But when you regularly ask yourself, why am I doing this? Or, does this still align with who I'm becoming? You course correct faster. You stop spending years climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. You notice sooner when something feels hollow or out of alignment, and you have the courage to pivot. And here's something most people never consider. Your daily self-inquiry isn't just about you. The clarity and self-awareness you develop ripple out to everyone around you. When you are grounded in your own truth, you show up in your relationships with more honesty and compassion. You stop projecting your unexamined fears onto other people. You communicate more clearly. You set healthier boundaries. You model what it looks like to be self-responsible. If you're serious about transforming your mind and your life, start by committing to a daily practice of reflection. Make it non-negotiable, the same way you brush your teeth or eat breakfast. Even 5 minutes a day can change everything over time. Because when you create space to hear yourself, you begin to trust yourself. When you trust yourself, you stop looking for permission to live the way you really want to. You become your own guide instead of your own critic. You realize that the answers you've been searching for have been inside you all along. You just needed to get quiet enough to hear them. I want you to remember something as you move forward. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too late to become the person you know, deep down, you're meant to be. Everything you need to change your life is already within you. The clarity, the courage, the strength to take the first imperfect step. All of it is there, waiting for you to trust yourself enough to begin. Maybe today is the day you finally stop believing the old stories that have kept you small. Maybe today is the day you stop waiting for permission to live differently. Maybe today is the day you decide to reclaim your mind, your energy, and your future. And if you ever start to doubt whether you're capable of this transformation, I want you to come back to this video. Let it remind you you are stronger than your fear. You are wiser than your doubt. You are more powerful than you can possibly imagine. You deserve a life that feels like yours, not a performance, not a checklist, not an endless race to prove your worth. A life rooted in intention, self-respect, and purpose. If this message resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it too. And if you want more tools, more conversations, more reminders that you are not alone on this journey, make sure you subscribe to this channel. I'm here, cheering you on every step of the way. You've got this, and I can't wait to see what you build next.